so we are having a conversation today called Family Matters, and what I think is important is more than 50 people since George Floyd's death have been killed by the police using physical restraint. Almost 1,300 people since George Floyd's death have been killed at the hands of law enforcement. And today we're speaking to some brilliant, bold, courageous women who have championed the cause and advocated for their family members after losing them to gun violence. I am proud and so pleased to introduce our panel. First is Sheila Albers, who's a mother, educator, and national advocate working to make health, education, and government systems more human-centered. After losing her unarmed son, John, to police violence in 2018, she led reforms in use of force policy, mental health response, and police training. Welcome, Sheila. Ashley Carr will also join us. She's a Dallas native and the eldest sister of a Tatiana Carr Jefferson, the 28-year-old black woman who was shot by police in her own home in 2019 and killed. In her honor, Ashley co-founded the Tatiana Project, which began as a STEAM summer camp and is now expanding into a year-round tech center to bridge the digital divide and promote educational equity. Welcome, Ashley. Allisa Charles-Findley is president of the Botham John Foundation, founded after her brother was fatally shot by a police officer in his own Dallas apartment. She champions faith-driven social change and was instrumental in passing Texas's Botham John Act, HB 929. Welcome, Allisa. Following the shooting of her son, Ahmaud Arbery, in 2020, Wanda Cooper fought to have her son's killers brought to justice. She also founded the Ahmaud Arbery Foundation that champions mental health awareness, scholarship opportunities, and youth development camps that uplift and empower young black men. Greta Gordy Gardner is Chief Legal and Program Officer and co-founder of UJIMA, the National Center on Violence Against Black Women. A former prosecutor, she led major reforms in Austin, Texas, including firearms surrender protocols and a prostitution diversion court. Welcome, Greta.
Thank you.
It's such an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. And one of the things we talked about backstage is so often you all are introduced and brought to stages, brought onto television programs, brought to media under the auspices of what you now have been forced to advocate for, to support, to champion change for. But I want this audience, we talked a little bit about that in your introductions, but I want the audience to know something else about you as an individual, beyond your pain, beyond what you champion, beyond what you advocate. Tell me something else about you. Sheila, I'll start with you.
My previous professional career was in public education. I was a teacher and a middle school principal. I also have 2 other children. I'm a wife. I still live in my same community. And really, it's my educator background that has helped me in the advocacy work I do now.
Thank you so much. Ashley, I'm gonna come to you.
Well, I would say for myself, I guess life just became, I guess they said I was the monarch of the family without trying to be. So I'm learning how to mother and care for my nephews right now and navigate life through all of this pain, really.
Thank you, Ashley. Allisa.
Something about myself is I've been in the healthcare industry for 20 years. That has been my passion ever since 2018. But of course, everything shifted after Botham was killed. But I'm still a strong advocate for healthcare, health insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, because I think along with us needing, social intervention, we also need healthcare. So I'm a strong advocate for that.
You definitely have a strong fight on your side right now, given everything that's going on. Wanda?
Good morning. Before losing Ahmaud, I was a licensed property insurance adjuster, and haven't been able to go back to work, being that I was put into a position where I had to fight for justice for Ahmaud and starting the foundation.
And Greta, I know the work that you do isn't tied to a personal loss, but what actually thrusted you into this work?
Well, I actually was honored to be a facilitator of a listening session where I got to meet these amazing families, because at Ujima, we not only address domestic violence and sexual assault, but also community violence, because in order to deal with the wholeness of the Black community, you have to deal with all three of those. And so it's really been a privilege to learn more from these families so that Ujima can do more on the national landscape.
I love that. I want to... Okay, try that again. I want to check in with you all on the shifts. At least half of you referenced things shifting after your loved one was killed at the hands of police violence. So I want to ask you how many of you all completely shifted in terms of careers, like what happened job-wise? Are you all employed where you were before the killing of your loved one? If you are still employed where you were before the killing of your loved one, raise your hand. Yeah, so half of you. So Sheila, I'm going to come to you. Can you talk to us about the tragedy of your son John being killed and what happened as a result of him losing his life? What happened with you economically and in your place of employment? You referenced being a teacher and a principal.
So John was killed January 20th of 2018. And we did what I think everyone else did, and that's initially we did go back to work. I took off about 4 weeks, but my husband took off a week. I mean, he was killed on a Saturday. We buried him on a Friday, and Monday my husband was back at work, and I was a few weeks later, because you need your income, and so. I went back into my very public role as a middle school principal. I didn't walk away from my career until June of 2019 when we settled our civil case. And it did give me an opportunity to do advocacy work. But despite the tragedy, you're still expected to go back to life as normal when life does not feel normal at all.
And you all don't feel, I know you want to be supportive, but you don't have to clap after each answer. They are very powerful and courageous women. We will give them a resounding round of applause at the end of this, but I just want to keep our conversation flow. I appreciate what you're saying about the advocacy work. I want to come to you all on this point. Did you feel like you had a choice, given the fact, right, that your loved one was martyred, essentially? You know that these killings are happening everywhere. Sheila, for me, it's surprising to see someone who is the parent of someone who doesn't look like the rest of this panel, right? It is not always the case. And for the most part, we are overwhelmingly and disproportionately killed at the hands of police. So I know, Allisa, I want to come to you. You've worked on legislation to ensure that Botham was the last person. Talk about that drive and beyond your own loss, utilizing your grief for some societal change that would push legislation across the floor in the Texas House and Senate.
Well, for me, when Botham was killed in 2018, when I got the call, I live in New York, and on the plane heading to Dallas, I felt, in my mind, I thought, well, Botham will be the last one, because here he was, an accountant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, praise leader at a Christian church, and just your ideal person killed in his home just eating ice cream. I thought he would be the last one. But then in 2019, on my plane ride back home after the trial and conviction of Amber Geiger, we had a Tatiana Jefferson. So I reached out to some state representatives in Dallas and I said, we need to do something. So we worked on the bill, and of course it was cut in half because a lot of the things that we wanted to happen, you have to please both sides. But I wanted something. I wanted to start somewhere. So we got the HB 929, Botham Act, which makes it illegal for police officers to turn off their body cams in an active crime scene. Because Amber Geiger, we saw where she was given the privilege of turning off the dash cam in the car she was in to give her privacy. And to me, even though you are a law enforcement agent at the time, you are the main suspect, so you should not be allowed that privacy. So we worked on that, and we're still working on it to add more to it, because if this keeps going, we will still be working.
What keeps you going in the face of, like when we were backstage, you were like, what you think is going to happen with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act? That is such a low bar. There are folks who, like you all, who are activists in this space, again, being thrust into it by your pain, who are like, this is the least you all can do. It could only pass the House when Democrats were in charge. Didn't make it even through the Senate. I mean, a very bare bones measure. A lot of folks said it was due to the qualified immunity provision. But talk about what that's like when you know all that was sacrificed from your family, but they won't even ban carotid and chokeholds. I'll go to you.
I just want to add that I wasn't really a part of the changes in Georgia, but losing Ahmaud prompted the state of Georgia to get rid of that citizen's arrest, because when Ahmaud was killed, what they said initially was Ahmaud was doing a crime, and these guys in the neighborhood was going to do a citizen's arrest. That law was, I think, put in place in 1864, and it was still on the books of Georgia.
And that was before slavery
was
ended in some spaces. Like, it was after emancipation, but a lot of folks didn't know they were free.
But it's no longer in Georgia now on the books. And also, Georgia didn't have a hate crime law. And the way Ahmaud was brutally murdered, we now have a hate crime law in the state of Georgia.
Thank you so much. Greta, I want to come to you on this too, because what Ms. Wanda just brought up is vigilantes acting under the color of law, and I just referenced slavery. Those are the folks, and this is actually how law enforcement was created in this country. Folks acting under the color of law, going to capture what they called fugitive slaves then, and these same type vigilantes are the ones that the George Zimmermans of the world that killed Trayvon, that I think many of us, how many of you all were moved around police and vigilante justice when you saw Trayvon Martin's killing? What do we do to really restrain people from moving as vigilantes in this country when the whole law enforcement system was built on vigilante justice?
Oh, so a softball question, Angela, right?
I mean, come on, counselor. I thought this was a safe space.
So, I mean, honestly, I think it really begins in community, to be quite honest. I don't think that, and elections have consequences, right? And who are we electing in our local jurisdictions and in our statewide elections? To make sure that there are restrictions on how people can move throughout our community and the powers that are given to them, the deputizing, right, of civilians is dangerous because that gives them unfettered actions and power to do whatever with whomever without consequence. So I really do believe that I love the community violence intervention programs that are out there because there's another level of accountability and someone's watching, right? And so there are consequences. So I think that really it's about community action. I mean, I think we saw not Missouri, but it was on a bridge, and some folks were marching, and they were in the wrong area of town, and the community came together to make sure that they marched on somewhere else. So I really do think it's about us holding ourselves accountable for our own safety, how it kind of used to be, right? And so until we have elected officials who really believe in that community-based, community action, accountability and responsibility, I think we're going to see more unfettered actions by state actors.
You brought up such a remarkable point around violence prevention programs, and I'm saying it's remarkable because sadly, in this current administration, these same violence prevention programs are being cut. Hundreds of millions of dollars are now impacting these folks, and this is supposed to be a law and order administration, law and order that has never really served us. And on that point, Ashley, I want to come to you because your sister's in her own home, playing video games with her nephew. supposed to be in the safest space. I think we think our homes are the safest spaces, our refuge, and yet it was not a refuge. It ended up being a nightmare. Can you talk about your sister's story and how it led you to this place?
Well, when my sister was murdered, it was a really bad place to be in, just being honest. My mother was in the hospital fighting for her life. My other sister had just got out of the hospital having her second open heart surgery, which is Zion's, the nephew that was there, that was his mother. So we were just trying to keep our family together. We wasn't bothering nobody. We were law-abiding citizens or things like that. And when you were talking about like your job and things like that, I didn't get compassion. It was, you need to take that FMLA real quick, or you need to figure out where else you need to go. And even so, during this process, I even got the opportunity to work at a Big Four, that my degree, my master's is in finance. So that's something that, most people would be honored to do. But then when you work with people who don't value this and you have to take off for work because you got to go to court because I'm my sister's advocate. They didn't understand that. Every time he showed up to court, I was there because I wanted them to know that she might not have a voice here, but I'm going to be her voice. I was my mother's legs during this whole process, and there was no real support. So much so that when I was working at the Big Four, they just told me that my services were no longer needed because they realized that is more important to me than anything else. And I was honestly, yes it is. So I took the loss with no problem because I'm always going to advocate for my sister no matter what.
I think on that, Ashley, I want to stay with you for a moment, and then I'll open it up to you all more broadly. Your advocacy wasn't just in ensuring that your sister's killer saw justice. You all also have to take on this added burden of disrupting stereotypes about your loved ones.
Yes.
Right? So can you talk a little bit about the STEAM camp, the program that you created on the other side of her death?
Well, my sister, she's an Xavier graduate. She has a bachelor's in biology and a minor in chemistry. She was in the choir in college. She was in the band in high school. So she was a real rounded person. And what I learned when my sister was killed is that everybody wanted to focus on that she had a gun. But we live in Texas. Who doesn't have a gun? I'm just going to be honest. But she did all the things that she was supposed to do. She did the courses to have a gun, to have the license and things like that. So she wasn't being just reckless. She was very important. Responsible with that. So what we decided to do, me and my siblings, was like, we're not going to let the media narrate her legacy. So we started a nonprofit called the Tatiana Project, which we've been doing for the last 5 years. It's a week-long free STEM camp to the kids in the area, which is 76104. That's our zip code. It's one of the lowest life expectancies areas in Texas. And our goal is to they took something from that, so we're going to pour more into that. We're going to pour into the next generation. We talk about all different things of STEAM. We do a lot of exposures for the kids because we want them to be well-rounded. We even give them, at the end of camp, everyone receives a laptop because we make sure that they have computer literacy in their house and not just school-issued laptops. So we are really trying to keep her legacy alive, so much so that the house that my sister was killed in, we're looking in the process of turning it into a technology center where it's just going to be games over guns because there's a lot of gang violence, gun violence in that area. So what can we do to help that, and keep my sister's name alive?
I understand that clap. I'm holding back tears and wanting to clap myself. Ashley, that is remarkable on so many levels, and especially because backstage, and you all just heard this, she lost her job doing this work. And I just want to make sure if there are anybody in here that want to help to fund what you are doing, these camps need to be stood up in our communities all over the country. I don't believe in having a panel with no action. Right. So if folks want to stand up in a Tatiana Jefferson camp and support the one that you're already doing, because she lost her job, y'all, well, how do they support you?
We have, you can always reach out to us. We are on all social media platforms, as well as, I'll be here walking around if anyone wants to talk or, or anything like that. We're definitely open. We do need, because funding is being cut for all these programs, and we're fighting for our lives, but we're going to make sure, I believe that it's going to happen.
Sheila, I want to come to you. We talked about debunking these stereotypes. What is a fact about your son that you didn't hear discussed enough in the media after his killing?
That he was an athlete and that he loves sports, that he was a good student. Those things were not mentioned. I think we can all, we had the common experience of false narratives, and that there's a playbook that local municipalities, police departments, and district attorneys use in these cases, and it's to paint the ugliest picture possible of the victim. So much so that when we obtained the report of my son's, the investigation of his death 2 years later, it took us 2 years to get it, he was referred to as a suspect through the whole report, and he had not committed a crime. So the false narrative piece is one of the ways they try to get our families to give up and walk away. John was struggling with mental health issues, but the officer who shot and killed him that night knew he was going to a welfare check, but had no other background about John when he fired 13 times into our minivan. So they rob us of our children, and then they rob us of their names and their reputation, and it is like losing them all over again, repeatedly.
And Allisa, I want to come to you because it's not just our children, it's also our siblings. Can you talk about what also was not articulated clearly or truthfully in the media about Botham, including him being in his own apartment?
So for Botham, yes, he was killed in his apartment because the officer, Amber Geiger, got off on the wrong floor, went into his apartment because she thought it was she thought it was hers, opened the door and shot and killed Botham, shot him through his heart. For me, I think we were lucky that the type of life Botham lived explained his character. He explained his character to everyone because there was an outpour of videos of him singing in chapel and just doing a whole lot of community service and all of that we were able to just pour out to social media that made it to the mainstream media. But of course, there was still an effort to assassinate his character because at his funeral service, the media put out that there was a search warrant for marijuana in his apartment on the day that we were burying him. That we were able to combat because with all of that being put out, all we did was just throw out more videos because Botham would record himself singing and send it to us. He was that type of person. He would, make a meal that didn't look so good and still send it to us. So he always made sure that we had something of him. I hate taking pictures, but he loved it. So we had so much to put out there to combat the negative, which resulted in us getting a murder conviction for Amber Geiger. But we still put out all that positivity about Botham because the one thing I know every one of us fear is that the world would forget our loved ones. I would hate for someone to forget Botham. So we still put it out there because every act that we do for our foundation is to me like a heartbeat for Botham to keep him living on.
And Ms. Wanda, I want to come to you, same question around the stereotypes that you were able to combat, or even now, if there's some things that you know how they talked about Ahmaud in the press, who's just taking a job. Talk to us about what they got wrong. What is the truth about Ahmaud?
Well, Ahmaud was 24, and he was back living at home with me. He was having some mental challenges, and we were on the road of figuring out things. But when Ahmaud was killed, he found joy in running. And when he was killed, I was called, now I know, like 5 hours later, stating that Ahmaud was committing a burglary, and he was confronted with the homeowner and then shot and killed. So immediately, I knew that didn't sound like Ahmaud, but at the same time, that was in the media. And we went like 74 days without having an arrest. And we didn't get an arrest until the video came, because they were just continually telling my family and I that Ahmaud was doing something wrong. And they had a video. And I asked repeatedly, can I please see the video? And if Ahmaud was doing something wrong, I would go away. But they couldn't produce the video with Ahmaud doing anything wrong. Instead, Ahmaud was not the model child like Botham. So he had some brushes, but at the same time, Ahmaud wasn't doing anything on the 23rd of February. He was out for a job. And when I knew it was inconsistencies in the stories, I knew I had to stand up and fight for justice for Ahmaud.
Greta, I want to come to you on this idea about not just toxic, but very errant, disrespectful narratives. Why hasn't there been an approach to sue for defamation when they are tarnishing the names and the images and the character of loved ones? Why hasn't there been a push around that from your perspective?
So I think it's really hard, right? It's really challenging because, and I'll talk about it in the context of victims' compensation, because I know that's important to this group and also to the Henrys, who are trying to increase the designation for who qualifies. And what you have is the state actor who is responsible for the harm controlling the narrative. And so it is not in their best interest to create a truthful story about your loved ones. It is in their best interest to reduce their liability and to control the story. And the best way they can do that is by vilifying it. And so it's almost like, how do you prove a negative, right? And so I think the push is difficult because, one, you're trying to prove a negative, and two, these families are grieving. And I think that's what struck me the most in the listening sessions, is that they're doing multiple things. They're trying to live their lives, trying to work, trying to take care of their children, trying to deal with the grief, the cleanup of the crime scene, paying for all of this, and they're being treated with disrespect. They're being ostracized, their loved ones being vilified. Who has the energy to do that in the moment, right? You didn't even get the video, right? I mean, so I think that there has just not been a cohesive vehicle to really take all of these issues and push them forward. We were talking earlier about there really needs to be a coalition to really advocate for this, and Ujima's ready to stand up and be a part of that and to help facilitate that. And we're also talking about there are other issues too, like we work with the Jelani Day Foundation. And so she was helpful in getting legislation around, if someone is not identified within 3 days, you have to bring in the FBI. And so who are all these cohorts of people who don't have a designation, who don't have access to information? There's no procedural justice and fairness. And so when you're caught up in this conundrum, it's hard to do all the things all the time. And so I think really the issue, to answer your question, is there is not one unifying entity to really do this, and it's really by state. And so the federal government really, doesn't really have a place in this right now, but they could in some of the regs and recommendations and incentivize the states to make sure that families, loved ones are treated fairly, whether there's a justifiable, unjustifiable shooting, what have you, is to make sure that the families are treated with dignity, that they're treated with respect, that there's procedural fairness, and making sure that you don't have to desecrate the name or the experience or the life of my loved one as we are trying to figure out what happened and what's next.
Just to tag team off of that, we were only able to change the false narrative in John's case because the Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation into John's death. And we did not get an indictment, but we did get the DOJ put out a corrected narrative on what happened to John the night he was killed. And then I used that to file an ethics complaint against the district attorney for making false and misleading statements. But if the DOJ had not stepped in, I would not have had that option. Now that district attorney got his hand slapped, nothing significant, but I do think it gave other district attorneys pause on what information do they put out around our loved ones. I think they will be more careful. I still don't think they're going to be treating us with dignity or humanity, but at least it was a slap on the wrist for false information.
And defamation suits require lawyers, right?
Right,
And
that's
so
right.
Mr. Crump can't be everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure there are other civil rights attorneys who do this work every day that aren't Ben Crump too. I love Ben Crump, that's my brother, but I know there are other folks in here. How many of you all are civil rights attorneys or that do work around police brutality? Anybody in here? There's a few hands. I think it's important to recognize them as well because the work is not easy. I want to go just for a moment because you mentioned DOJ, the Civil Rights Division, opening up this case. What year was that?
It was 2020. It was actually a few months after George Floyd was murdered. And the reason they opened it was because we discovered that the officer who killed my son had been given a $70,000 severance payment to resign. And so when that information went out, that is when the DOJ opened their investigation. And so many of us are left with having to do open records to gain the information that we should have had on the front end. And it takes a lot of time and energy to do those open records requests in order to get that information out there.
And what we should know in this country is there was a time where civil rights was not a partisan issue. Now, increasingly, it has become one, especially under this administration. These remarks are mine. They should not reflect on the United Justice Coalition. But I will say this. Now we have an administration that has also rolled back the very database that would hold law enforcement accountable at the federal level if they've had issues in one jurisdiction and try to move to another one. That is shut down. So the civil rights protections you got in 2020, that first administration, this new version of this thing is gone. The Civil Rights Division is protecting white men who are Christian. That is what they're doing. If you don't believe me, look it up. But I do want to go to this as well. We know that mental health should not be a death sentence for your loved ones or for anyone else, but there have to be like something that is created among you all, a bond. Allisa, I've seen you do this the most. When someone's loved one has been impacted by law enforcement violence, you step up. What is the driving force behind you all doing this? There are so many people who, when they experience this, they shut down or they get stuck. You all have not only been able to move and to advance and advocate on behalf of your loved one, you stand in the gap for other people who are going to do the same thing. How?
Because I know what I went through when I lost Botham. Nothing to take away from the moms, but as a sibling, or the parents, as a sibling, it hurts just as it would hurt the parents because, your sibling is your first best friend. And I was privileged to have my brother as my best friend till the end. He was my person. And I know that pain and void of losing him. So I reach out to others because I know that pain. A lot of people, I lost a lot of friends because people did not understand. They thought, I even had someone tell me, well, I know what you're going through because I lost my cousin to cancer. It's not the same. And some people don't understand that. They think a loss is a loss. But when you have a loss that's so sudden, that sends you into this shock that develops into PTSD, anxiety, depression, you having to be on medication for all of that, it's different. So I reach out to other people, and to me, I have lifelong friends in Angela and Dan Henry and Michelle Kinney and Ashley and so many people on here, because I know if there is something that's new that developed, or I'm even triggered, I could pick up the phone and call one of them, and they will know without me even saying a word or without me even having to explain what I'm feeling. And vice versa, I want other family members to know that, you can pick up the phone, call me, and I will get it. I will listen. If you want to scream, I will listen. So I think it's important to have that community of families, because it's a little different when you lose your loved one to a traumatic incident such as this.
I want to come to you all now about triggers. We just saw Tyree Nichols' killers be acquitted. Again, we talked about this law enforcement database being eliminated. Again, a very low bar. And then conversations about pardoning George Floyd's killers. So I want to just stay here for a moment on what that's like when justice was barely served, if it was even served, and how that might trigger you all. What is your response?
I'll go first. Seeing the stories, because like Ashley, like someone said earlier, when I lost Ahmaud, I thought that he would be the last one. And then it was like 13 days later, it was George Floyd. And just to know that if the world didn't see that video, they would be still walking around as free men. And it's really sad because Ahmaud's life mattered, and they were treating it so lightly. And to see Tyree's mom and his father a couple of weeks ago, and to see the pain in their eyes, knowing that justice was denied, it's very, very painful. And it's very discouraging because things hadn't changed since 2020 at all. So that's what triggers me the most, is when I keep repeatedly seeing the same patterns with no change.
I would say, similar to what you're saying about the triggers, I'm gonna be honest, I do get the triggers of, oh Lord, it's happening again. But then when I look at my sister's case, Aaron Dean has exhausted all his opportunities for an appeal before this new administration came in. So that was, I don't want to say, but it felt like a blessing in disguise that he can't get out. We will be waiting for him to do the parole process and things of that nature. But that is so a rare entity, and you're just seeing one by one. Breonna Taylor's, they're all getting, the police who killed her, they're all getting off and things of that nature. It's like they're literally just going down the list and unraveling everything that we fought for during those years, during 2020 and 2021 and things of that nature.
I think for me, really, triggers, anything, little things could be a trigger, especially if I see someone that looks like Botham and I want to run up to them. That's a trigger. But also, similar to Ashley, when we went through all the appeals, we just last year went through the parole hearing. We went through a civil trial. And with all of these, where you have to go and relive the worst day of your life, and look at pictures of your loved one, to see him, on a slab cut open, and then at the same time to see him, the happy photos, smiling, and they play video because they want to tug at the jury, so they play video of him singing, and you keep looking at the door to see if he will come in. All of these are triggers. For us, this year will be 7 years since we lost Botham, and we're still gearing up for another fight because the city of Dallas refuses to accept that they were at fault, or Amber Geiger even worked for them at the time because she was considered technically off duty. So we're gearing up for another fight against them. So of course the triggers will be back, but even though they're all triggers, even though they're hurtful moments, I will do it all over again because I'm fighting for my brother because he can't right now. And I know for a fact that if the tables were turned, he would do the same, hands down.
Can I just add something also? What really triggers me also is when I'm riding down the street and I see like a dead dog or cat that's been hit by a car. Ahmaud was actually chased and killed like he was prey, like he was an animal. And every time that I see something dead along the road, I often think about my son, how he was shot and killed in the middle of the street, and he laid there with no one there in his last minutes of his life.
There are a lot of families who have lost loved ones at the hand of vigilante injustice or law enforcement killing. But the narrative and the media has not been on their side. Some of them are in my DMs on Instagram. Some of them write blog posts. Every now and then you'll see people with long tweets just trying to raise attention to their stories. What are some of the things that you all have done and would recommend to the folks who are just trying to ensure that the justice of being able to tell the story is brought to pass for their family member?
Well, in my own community in Kansas City, I have reached out to families immediately after seeing something on the media regarding a police shooting, and I attempt to get them connected to good legal representation because that's going to be their first step in getting a correct narrative out there to get their story out there. If no one sits with our families after someone has been killed and says, oh, let me explain the investigative process to you. Let me let you know when there'll be updates. They do things like withhold autopsy results and your loved one's personal items, anything to make you miserable. And so what I've done, and all of us have done at some point, is reached out to a family and said, let's get you the support that you need so that there isn't a false narrative, or you're at least able to counter it.
I would say connecting with the community, just being honest. That's what drove a lot of the decisions that they wasn't going to be silent. They were at every city council meeting and showing up protesting at the district attorney's office and things like that to let them know that we're not. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone, because there was a lot of times I did feel like I have to navigate this all by myself. So with that community connection, and I'm from Dallas and my sister got killed in Fort Worth, and it's like they're together but they're not. But to know that regardless, at that moment, they were like, we were down to be with you. It really felt good. So that's a really big thing, big driver, is connecting with the community that you were affected in.
I would say, along with connecting with the community, which is really vital, is to combat the negative narratives. That was my technique. I made it a sport, because every negative post or comment I saw, I would post my own positive, like, well, this is Botham, I don't know who you're talking about. And I did that every day, and then family members would repost and whatever. So it was really just to flood social media with positive images and videos of Botham to just combat every negative one.
Mine would be similar to Ashley's. It's just connecting with the community. Like I shared earlier, it was 74 days without an arrest. But immediately when that video was linked, not just my community, not just my state, but people around the world were actually chanting justice for Ahmaud. And it really made me feel good going into the trial, knowing that I had people that wanted justice the same as my family and I.
Before you go, Greta, I just want to pause here because I think it's important. Even when I opened today, I referenced how many people have been killed at the hands of police violence since George Floyd. I think it's important for this. I know this room knows already, but there would not have been the type of response to the George Floyd killing without Breonna Taylor and without Ahmaud Arbery. So I want to make sure you hear that from all of us if you don't hear that enough. We know that it was part of the tipping point, part of what has changed. We also know that that means that there's a bigger fight because they're taking all those things back. But I do want to acknowledge that. Greta.
I remember from the listening session, one gentleman did billboards. Do you remember that? He did billboards to tell his story, to bring awareness so that everybody knew what his family was experiencing. But I think one of the things that I have seen recently was the two athletes at the track meet where they were told to move. The black kid was told to move, and the white kid told him he had to go, and the black kid stabbed him. And the negative media Carmela Anthony came out and immediately, without even knowing this kid, and the family immediately, every negative thing that came out, they combated with a positive image and said, no, that's not the story. That's not who he is. And I thought that, wow, because of the experiences before them, they were able to know exactly what to do and in a timely way. But I can't imagine having to do that and still be grieving because they've lost their child to the industrial prison complex and could have stayed there but for, the resources that they had to them.
And Greta, I'm going to stay with you as we wrap the conversation. This is the United Justice Coalition. We are all coming together to collaborate around the pursuit of justice, the justice we all deserve. And you talked about your organization. I want to know how people can support that, especially given the fact that you are saying we're here, we want to be a resource for folks who are going through this, whether they're siblings or parents of loved ones who have been killed at the hands of police violence. So how can they support your organization?
Well, I really appreciate that because we were a part of the swath of grantees who lost funding in April. So we are trying to figure that out.
Can you talk about how much funding you lost?
My boss is in the audience, but yes,
Boss, we trying to get you some money in this room, so hopefully you'll give this a pass.
We lost $3.7 million. And it was because of that grant that I was able to be the facilitator for the listening session where I got to meet these amazing families. But yes, we have a wonderful website, ujimacommunity.org. We are on all the platforms at Ujima Community. And if you Google my name, lots of stuff will come up anyway. But that's how you can support us. Thank you for that.
Thank you, absolutely. Ms. Wanda, what's a call to action? This is a group of people who aren't just here to learn and to listen. I know that they are here to act. How many of you all want to take action after this panel? Well, that's everybody. So let's make sure we give them some action items.
I founded the Ahmaud Arbery Foundation. The foundation promotes physical and mental well-being in Black boys. We do scholarships at Ahmaud's old high school and also my old high school every year. And we also do a youth experience. It's a weekend that we get about 30 to 45 boys. We get them together for a weekend and we give them some sessions on like mental health. We give them a session on physical well-being. And also we do something called a session on social justice. We have been doing that for the last 2 years. So I'm asking that if you guys can take a look at my website and you find that you want to support what we're doing in my community, please do. And we're on all social platforms, the AhmaudArberyFoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hashtag Run with Maud.
Allisa.
So I started the Botham Foundation. Botham was killed in September 2018. It was up October 31st, 2018, because I needed to fill the void. But our aim is to promote Christian intervention for social change. And we basically continue the work that Botham started in his short 26 years on earth. He was He was passionate about giving back to vulnerable communities in St. Lucia, where we're from. So we're continuing his work. It's the Bothamfoundation.org. This year we're having our gala in St. Lucia. So we're very excited about that. We're bringing it back home. But if you do want to support, we're on the socials and the website, Botham Foundation. Thank you.
Ashley.
Well, we do have, me and my siblings, my brother is currently active in the Navy right now, but we have the nonprofit called the Tatiana Project, and we've been doing summer camp for the last 5 years, and now we're about to expand to do games over guns in the neighborhood. This has been really, I'll say, eye-opening. I will say my request. Yeah, if you can help with funding, we definitely need that, because we are a grassroots nonprofit, so we don't get any grants or anything from anyone else. We have literally thrived for the last 5 years off of donations from the people. If you cannot have funding or things of that nature, our slogan for my sister is "Pull up for Tay." Because in that slogan, it's using your gift, whatever your gift is, to amplify my sister. We've had people to make a song about my sister, and then they gave proceeds to the nonprofit, or they might not have any, but they might have a connection. People might have connections to other organizations that could help us and things of that nature. We're currently trying to raise about $20,000 for summer camp right now. And so we're open to all donations and in-kind donations and things like that. So we're on all social media platforms. You can contact us at contact@tatianaproject.org if you want to email us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Sheila.
We set up an endowment at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City to expand psychiatric services for adolescents in John's name, which is important work. But my big call to action is to push for change in your own local municipalities. I live in Overland Park, an affluent suburb of Kansas City, and we really have done a 180. We now have a fully funded and staffed mental health unit in the police department that responds to these type of calls. We have a police transparency page that is better than any other police department in the state of Kansas. We changed the use of force policy. We really have our community, when we talk about the importance of community, our community has really pushed for some significant changes right in our own suburb. And then if you live in a state where body cam footage is not an open record, I would highly suggest that you push for those changes. Without access to body cam footage, the chances of accountability are slim to none. So in our quest for justice, for not just for our families, but other families, transparency and accountability are key.
Thank you so much. My call to action for you all today is, when you see these ladies walking around, you don't just ask them how they're doing. Let them know you have them. Let Sheila know you have Sheila and John. Let Ashley know you have Ashley and a Tatiana. Let Allisa know you have Allisa and Botham. Let Miss Wanda know you have Miss Wanda and Ahmad. And definitely make sure you let Greta know that you got her back too. We thank you all so much for your time this morning.